Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. Tressa Johnson from the Kitsap Regional Library is here today, and we're going to talk about some security issues. I do want to mention that Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island sponsors Something to Talk About. They offer assisted independent living and memory care up on their beautiful Rolling Bay campus. You can find out more and even drop by and have a free lunch in their beautiful bar and grill. Call 206-594-1010. Ask about day stay, respite care programs, and to learn more, come by for a tour, have lunch, as I said, or check out their website at fieldstonecommunities.com. Also, we would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water, who have been living on the waters of the Salish Sea since time immemorial. We honor them, and we are learning from their stewardship of these lands and waters so we can be better stewards of these lands and waters. Tressa, thank you as always for stopping by and sharing some of the research that you have done in your role as adult services librarian.
Thank you, Reed. The last few months, I have been talking about three topics in particular, just little soupçons of each topic. The first being personal privacy, the second being scams, and the third information literacy. So starting with privacy, last month I talked about passwords and shared the suggestion to have a password notebook, something that is paper, that you can keep as safe as your wallet, review regularly, which is very hard to do. I don't want to do it, but I know that by the end of the year, it's a mess. So, and so that's one piece of that's what I talked about last month. Now, the more time, the reason it's so difficult is because the more time we spend online, the more passwords we're being asked to create. And I know I'm not alone in when I get to a point that I'm asked to create a password, the last thing I want to do is create a password. What I want to do is get past that wall to the next stage. And it's tempting to break all the rules. It's tempting to pick something that is short, something, maybe it's a recycled password from another that we've used elsewhere, or a slight variation. And those things, when we make those decisions, we are making ourselves vulnerable to criminals. So today I want to touch on creating a password, how we can create passwords that are a little bit stronger. Now, I'm assuming that you have a password notebook set aside. Reed, you suggested last month using an address book so you could put your passwords in alphabetically by organization, which is a great idea. So we know that longer passwords are safer. We know that we want a unique password for each online account that we own. And we also want a password that is easy for us to remember, but difficult for a computer to figure out. So one suggestion that I've seen in a number of places is to create a passphrase. And what that refers to is putting three unrelated words together to create a password. And you can, if you're required to put in a number or a character, you can go ahead and do so. But the main suggestion is having those three unrelated words. So an example would be cooking, fern, and bottle. I don't know. But three words that have no connection to anyone else. But in my mind, I'm in my kitchen cooking, looking out the door at my fern, next to which there is a bottle that I use to water the ferns. I don't know, I'm making it all up. But, you know, there's some rhyme and reason for you. So I wanted to, so that's a suggestion for creating a passphrase. Now, creating a passphrase like that is more difficult for a computer. than had you used a repeating password, or one that had personal information, or one that was short. It's harder for a computer. It's also much easier for you not only to remember, but you know how to spell those words. You put them in your notebook accurately. You can type them accurately. It just makes the process much easier. So that's passwords for this month.
Well, that's kind of interesting. I also think that you could, if you had one sort of nonsense word in there. So maybe I don't know, maybe, or, well, a nonsense word. I also have seen people use numbers and letters, but I don't know whether that's so common now that the clever AI generators are going to figure out, they're going to try zeros for O's and threes for E's. And so,
Yeah.
so that's where the passphrase works, I guess, is it's, as long, as long as you don't use something that is going to be strung together. 7 years ago is not going to work, because that's
No.
going to show up as a phrase on the internet and it's going to be tried. But what, like you said, the fern bottle, I missed one.
Cooking
Cooking
fern
fern,
bottle, I think. Yeah.
that is not likely to be generated by a AI. Good idea. And
Yeah.
easy to write down, like you said, and easy for you to not make a mistake when you're typing it in, because, then when you're typing those things back in, that is another maddening part of the whole process.
Yes. Again, yeah, my heart rate goes up. I'm sure my blood pressure goes up. So another tool to have in our toolbox, so that we can effectively protect ourselves from the criminals that want to hack our accounts, while also making our lives just a little bit easier in the world that we live in today. So next, I have another short video on scams. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go.
I'm from Medicare. We're sending out the new cards, and I need to confirm your billing information to keep your coverage active. For your protection, I need the last 4 numbers of your Social Security number. We need this urgently, or else you'll be charged a fee.
Scammers call people pretending to be Medicare representatives. If you receive a phone call from someone acting like a Medicare rep, asking for your personal information, bank details, or Medicare number, it's a scam. Do not give any personal information or money. If someone calls you offering free equipment or services in exchange for your Medicare information, do not accept and hang up. Don't worry about being rude or embarrassed. They're not going to give you free equipment. They just want your information for identity theft. If you get a phone call informing you of new policies or updates about Medicare, do not engage. Instead, initiate the call to Medicare. Then you can make sure that you're calling the correct number to talk to Medicare directly and report it to them. Medicare scams can happen to anyone, but if you tell the people around you, you might just keep it from happening to them. Whatever the scenario, remember 2 things: hang up and report the call.
One 800 Medicare. I can remember that number.
Right? Yeah, it's so much easier. So I can remember that too. And there we go. And there's the phone number as well for folks, if that is easier. And the video showed a different web address. I think they had ftc.gov/complaint. Either address will take you to the same place. Did check that. So now I want to talk about information literacy. Last month, we talked about definitions for disinformation, misinformation, and an echo chamber. And my initial thought was to talk about a filter bubble and talk about the fact that when we are online, that the searches we do the results are not, they're not answering our question. What they are doing is basically looking at our searching background and looking at what we've clicked on in the past and coming up with a series of results that are based on those previous actions that we've taken. So that's what I originally thought, and I am happy to talk about that because it's interesting, and also there are some ways that we can protect ourselves. I also was last month when I talked about this topic, Reed, you brought up some ideas that were really thought-provoking for me. This idea or this fact really, that the difference between news and commentary. And I've been reading about different ideas or different thoughts about the news environment in which we find ourselves. And what I have read makes me more curious about and makes me think more about how I'm ingesting the information around me. Information literacy tasks have, up to this point, it's an outline of things that I, as the user, have to remember to do. Is this a credible source? Who else is saying the same information? There are these tasks that I'm told to go through. And as a librarian, I am taught to do that as well, to verify sources. We all learned that in school. But when we are ingesting information in the context of social mass media, there's not time to do that always. You don't want to do that. And the most engaging news information really is commentary. And, it just doesn't lend itself to the tools that we've talked about in the past. So I was reading about the history of mass media and how, in the past, we had only a handful of channels: NBC, ABC, CBS. That was it, a PBS, right? And all of the advertising dollars then were shared by by the three main stations. And the news, I'm gonna actually take off. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here. And the news environment, their goal was to create a news program that was offensive to as few people as possible, right? Because they wanted people to watch them. And then in the 80s and 90s, we saw the advent of cable TV. Networks started creating channels that were geared towards specific audiences. So we naturally, as humans, we are drawn to confirmation bias, right? What we want to hear is what we already believe. And so these news outlets, these channels, their goal now is to engage us and maintain our engagement, because that's how they get tax dollars, is with high viewership.
Advertising dollars.
Pardon me?
Tax dollars or advertising dollars?
Advertising dollars. So you have high viewership, you're able to, advertisers will pay more, and that's...
Well, and increasingly with this, just to play off this, narrow casting is it's like we now have a series of channels. It's like they're now selling advertising or connections for specific audiences. So they're more interested in reaching, say, 18 to 34-year-old males, let's say. And so they aren't going to get that, what used to be called Mr. and Mrs. America, what now would be People of America, I think. They aren't doing that anymore. They aren't looking to try to find the least objectionable. They're trying to find the most dedicated, which is quite the opposite.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And so over this past month, I've been thinking about that and thinking about the difference between, news and commentary and pundits, and who they are, why they're on a program, and the experience of being a so-called, or being labeled an expert and being on television where you are being filmed and asked a question to which you feel you must answer. So there's no space or little space for saying, I don't know, or that's a good point, let me look into that. I mean, that environment simply does not allow for that, which means that we are which lands us in a difficult position, which has made me think more about, well, where can I get news? Where, what do I, maybe it's about being aware of who's paying the bills, being aware of, if I'm going to go to this newspaper, well, who owns this newspaper? Or
I mean, there's been a lot of pressure right now. Interesting commentary this is right up my alley. Interesting commentary I've been following about the New York Times. Jay Rosen, who is a professor at NYU, is a media professor, and he was talking on Threads, I think, about the idea. The executive editor of the New York Times had a conversation with Ben Smith saying, we are not going to become Pravda. We are going to be covering what we see. And as the New York Times, we feel as though we should let the chips fall where they may. Whereas a lot of liberals have been very critical of the New York Times as not being bullish enough on promoting the current president as the next president. And the challenge, one of the things that Dan Pfeiffer, who commented on Ben Smith, you need to recognize that the New York Times is not in the business of carrying water they're saying it out loud. So to me, that means, okay, it may not be the whole story, because there is no such thing as the whole story, but at least I know that the New York Times is, at least in an expressed manner, trying to play it down the middle. Now, that does not apply to their editorial pages, and I put a big question mark around when you see something that's labeled analysis, because I feel like that gives a lot of leeway to the reporter to sort of analyze, and therefore bring their own judgment into it in a way that could be colored by their political views or whatever. But it's the opinion pages, and it's the commentators on MSNBC and Fox News that get all the traffic. It's not the news blocks.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So
I'm with you. I'm with you. I don't know. I mean, it's very hard, and it's harder, I think, to be an informed citizen right now than it has been through my lifetime. Maybe not through the lifetime of the country, but through my lifetime.
Yeah, but yes, absolutely. Well, I hadn't heard that the J. Rosen, I think you said, or I hadn't heard that about the New York Times. What it heartens me to hear that they're saying the quiet part out loud, that they're explicitly recognizing the fact that they're explicitly recognizing the difference between, news and commentary, or news or opinion. I think in journalism, I mean, the nature of it's to be expected. Even a journalist sees the world through their own eyes. So they are reporting, but they've chosen what to report on. The things that stick out to them, the things that seem important are things, you can try to balance with awareness. You can, I would think, try to kind of be aware that there is bias, even if you're not aware what that bias is. But the first part is saying it out loud, right? The fact that we know, we recognize that this is, we recognize that that's what this is, and we don't want to do it. So thank you.
I mean, I just feel like you were saying it's gotten a lot more complicated, and so finding sources of information that you feel like are committed to trying to play it down the middle makes a lot of sense, and it's not easy, and it takes that kind of querying. And as I said last month, avoiding the outrage. If you're getting outraged, that's also a clue that somebody's pulling your chain, and it may not be the whole story.
Exactly. So this month on information literacy, it's more of a thought bomb, opposed to a specific skill. But
well, I would say if anybody who's watching this later has a suggestion of somewhere that you have found value, please put it in the comments. And if you aren't a YouTube subscriber and you just want to send it to info@biseniorcenter.org, that works too, and we'll share them next time.
Thank you. Wonderful.